Welcome to the Berean Remnant. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Mauser. And today what we're going to be talking about is what the government gets wrong about the role of prices during natural disasters. So we all know when there's a natural disaster, a lot of people are hurting. And most of us empathize with other people who are suffering, and especially those who are suffering from the effects of maybe a tornado or a hurricane. We actually, something in our hearts, we identify with them, and we want to do what we can to help them. And so, especially in the Christian tradition, we're admonished in Matthew 25, for example, that people who we meet who are hungry, we should feed them. If they're thirsty, we should give them something to drink. If they're naked, we should clothe them. Or if they're sick or in prison, we should visit them. Insofar as we do these things for people we meet, we're doing it for Jesus. And so this is the scriptural admonition to care for the poor. Insofar as we do for the least of these, we're doing it for the Lord. And so I think this motivates a lot of us to voluntarily give of our time and our talents and our treasures to help those who are suffering, who are in need. One of our initial reactions might be, okay, I need to rush to that area and do what I can to help. What I want to talk about today is basically what is it that the government does that actually hurts those who are in these affected areas. And so they may be doing it unintentionally, but I think what we need to do is learn some basic economics principles. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, "We need education of the obvious more than investigation of the obscure." And I think when it relates to the role of prices during natural disasters, this is one of the things that should be part of our education of the obvious. So for those of us that have had economics, or in my case, teach economics, this is something you want to impart to your students. There's three things that we know that prices do, and we know specifically during natural disasters why prices rise in areas where there's a natural disaster. What I'm not talking about here is inflation. So generally throughout the country, the reason there's inflation is because of money printing. So bad economic policies where the Federal Reserve prints money. So conceivably, if they will print twice as much money over the course of 4 years, then you'll find that prices have doubled over the last 4 years. So part of the reason that things are more expensive today than they were when you were a kid is because of the inflationary monetary policy of printing more and more money, which ended up devaluing your money. So it's not that you are all of a sudden having more buying power. It's because they've printed money. That's not what we're talking about here. Why is it in a disaster-prone area that prices rise? And though what we want to do often is we want to blame the person who is raising prices, jacking them up in those areas, maybe the guy who owns a hotel or the person who owns the grocery store who raises prices during natural disasters. What we want to do is, oh, they're just greedy. That's what we want to say. What we don't realize is there's a systemic reason underneath everything else that's causing the rising prices. It's not the greed that drives them. Rising prices are actually indicative of an underlying reality, that there's not enough stuff there because of the natural disaster. So when there's a major hurricane, when there's a tornado, another maybe a earthquake that hits or a tsunami, all of these natural disasters, they wipe out homes, they contaminate the water supply, so people don't have fresh water. What ends up happening to the price of lumber when that happens? Lumber ends up going up, the cost of lumber ends up going up in that area because they need lumber to rebuild their homes or to repair their homes. What ends up happening in America is lumber ends up, because of the higher prices in the South, when the South is hit by a natural disaster like a hurricane, lumber is diverted from where it was going. And maybe they were shipping it west, or maybe they were shipping it to other areas of the country where there was less need for it, and it goes to those areas where there's higher prices. So it actually floods into the very area where there's a scarcity of that resource, of lumber. So keep this in mind, as I'm going to explain three things that happen when prices rise in an area where there's a natural disaster. The first thing is people economize on scarce resources. In other words, they make wiser decisions when they're buying scarce resources if you raise the price of those scarce resources. So that's the first thing, that people who are in those areas, they don't buy as much of what they need because the prices have gone higher. So let's consider a scenario. Suppose I'm used to not only having a ton of drinking water for myself, I'm used to having a lot of water to bathe in. Maybe I want to wash my dog. Maybe I want to water my flower bed. Maybe it's the case I want to let my children have a water gun fight or something like that. When you see the cost of water has doubled or tripled in your area, you cut back on the things that's not needed. You're not going to wash your car. You might not water your garden. You're definitely not letting your kids have a squirt gun fight. And so, what are you using it for? Well, just the essentials. I need to survive. And so maybe you have some water that you get that you set aside for, okay, this is just going to be water just for necessities. This is for drinking. But this is for flushing the toilet, this water. So I don't need it to be perfectly sanitized. I just need to be able to flush the toilet. What I need for this is drinking water. And so you economize on the scarce resources in your area. That frees up the scarce resources for the next guy who also is economizing on scarce resources. So this is one thing. Economizing on scarce resources is one result of raising the price in that area. What's the second thing? The prices, when they go up, one of the things we have to realize is prices create incentives for people. Prices are what we call in economics knowledge surrogates. They indicate something about underlying reality, underlying states of affairs. So they're carrying bits of information that is a scarce resource. A lot of people don't have the knowledge they need to know, okay, we need this resource. All they'll see is a fluctuation of prices. Oh, the prices rise there. Well, then producers think, okay, if I need to make money, and if I want to make money for my business, what I could do is I can produce more of the scarce resource and try to get it to the area where the scarce resource is lacking. And so they end up rushing into the area where there are scarce resources and providing the very resource they need because they can make a profit. And they're not alone. Other manufacturers of those scarce resources also rush in there, hoping to make a profit. So although initially the first ones who arrive with the scarce resources are able to make a little bit more, as more and more goods and services that are scarce in that area flood into the area, the overall cost, because of the competition for these scarce resources, the price ends up coming down. So if I were to rush into an area where they had lost all power and I come in with 100 units of generators or something like that, and maybe I want to sell them for a lot of money, well, then the next guy comes and he's got 100 generators too. And so we're trying to compete with one another to sell the generators. Maybe we want to sell them for a lot of money, but as more people come in with these generators, each of us is trying to make the sale, and what ends up happening? The cost of generators ends up coming down for the people who are in these areas. And though we're still selling, maybe not as high as we want, because of the competition, the cost comes down. And the very things they need, that of the people who are in these areas, They're getting these things because of the rising prices. Here's a third thing. So the second is that manufacturers and producers rush into that area. They flood that area with goods and services that are needed because of the scarcity, because of the underlying reality of the natural disaster. The third thing is these same producers, some of them will think, okay, I'm not in the lumber industry, for example, or maybe I don't produce water, but I could think of a way to offer an alternative good or service that can meet the need of the scarce resource. So suppose the person is a rubber manufacturer, and he thinks, you know what? I've been developing this technology to use rubber to build things instead of lumber. And it's a pretty comparable price. It might even be able to be made for less money. And I can offer my new replacement alternative good instead of lumber, and I could sell this in that area to meet the need of those people who are in that area. So maybe in case of water or something, if there's a lack of water to the area, maybe you've developed some type of light technology that comes through, and it, instead of getting a shower, they could run a certain type of light over your body that sanitizes you. It removes all the bacteria, and maybe you just have to wipe yourself off with a towel or something for the skin that needs to be removed after they run this wand over you. Now, I threw this out to my children, and they marveled, a couple of them marveled at the idea of, oh, can we do that? Does that exist? I said, I don't know if that exists. I'm just making this up. But they were excited with the idea of, hey, that means you could just run the light wand over me, Dad. Why don't we get one of those? And then I won't have to shower, and we could go off and play again. Like, oh my gosh, I'm just making this up for illustration to teach you this economics principle. So this is a incredible result of having the higher prices, is that there are people who are brilliant entrepreneurs who come up with alternative products that they can offer to replace these scarce resources, and they could flood the area with that to help the people there with these alternative goods and products. So what does all this mean? What's the practical? Though the moral high ground in a lot of people's minds is that they should never raise these prices because that's really greedy. That's why they're doing it. The truth of the matter is that it's because of this area being wiped out that they don't have the lumber, they don't have the clean water, they don't have the food they need, they don't have all the other resources they need. They might need clothing, and they might need tents. There's going to be a lot of people who are rushing to provide those things. The high prices help that area get what they need more quickly. So the laws against this, they're called anti-price gouging laws. 37 of our 50 states currently have those. Some politicians are promising all 50 states, if I'm elected, all 50 states are going to get these. What's that going to do? It's going to hurt those who are worst off. They're already terribly off because they're going through these natural disasters. You're removing incentives, knowledge, you're removing all these key things from allowing these people to be helped due to these bad laws. What I would suggest is the anti-price gouging laws, even the word price gouging, is what we would call in logic a poisoning the well fallacy. Because when you think of gouging, especially in the circles of martial arts, that's something you do when you want to maim somebody. You gouge the eyes. So in martial arts circles, a lot of times when we're doing some type of competition, you're trying to win points, or you're trying to submit the person, but there's some things that are off limits. You're not allowed to gouge the eyes. And so just calling raising prices where there's a scarcity of goods and resources, calling it price gouging is poisoning the wells against it. If you understand the underlying economic reality and the good it does to raise prices that actually gets people what they need more quickly so that prices quickly return to normal. They're only going to return to normal faster by flooding that area with what they need. How do you know what they need? Well, the rising prices. So we definitely need to keep in mind helping the least of these who are afflicted by natural disasters. But what we don't want to do is have bad government policies that hinder us from helping them most quickly. So hopefully you're able to learn these basic economics lessons and you could see more clearly the reason for raising the price in areas that are hit with natural disasters. All right, Bereans. Well, I hope you all have a great day. And if you haven't done so, that you'll like and subscribe.